I want to end with just a note on the March on Washington, and maybe end with something that we're not going to see today. Because 60 years later, in our communities, even including our communities, the quote unquote organizational communities, the civil rights community, so to speak, you see more women. Like I said, Kristen Clark came out of the Lawyers Conference of Civil Rights. She's now the Deputy Attorney General, reign and fire with consent decrees and coming in the community is very important. And people say, well, women didn't speak at the March on Washington. Well, that's not technically true. Like I said, Anna Hedgeman wrote a memo. In fact, she includes the memo. If I can find it quickly, I might not be able to find it quickly in here. She includes the memo in her, here it is, in the Trumpet Sounds, August 16th, 1963. She writes to A. Philip Randolph. There she is. A. Philip Randolph, Director, National March on Washington, from Anna Arnold Hedgeman, Member, Administrative Committee, March on Washington. Reason, proposed program, Lincoln Memorial. She says that a Negro woman make a brief statement. She said, in light of the role of Negro women in the struggle for freedom, and especially in light of the extra burden they have carried because of the castration of our Negro men in this culture, it is incredible that no woman should appear as a speaker at the historic March on Washington meeting at the Lincoln Memorial. Since the Big Six civil rights leaders have not given women the quality of participation which they have earned through the years, now, who was also included in that was Dorothy Height, National Council of Negro Women. More on her in a second. I would like to suggest the following: that a Negro woman make a brief statement and present the other heroines, just as you have suggested that the chairman might do. It has occurred to me that no woman or man could object to Mrs. Medgar Evers, Myrlie Evers that is, the widow of our freedom martyr, for this role. Her performance on television just after the murder of her husband proves her ability to make even one sentence memorable. She mentioned perhaps Diane Nash coming in. Very important. But at any rate, and you go back into the narrative archive to see our long conversation on what led up to the 63 March and how Anna Hedgeman played a role in that, how she writes about this in The Gift of Chaos, how in 62, they were talking about a march. Randolph wants to do a march. By the spring of 63, she's telling them, you need to talk to Martin Luther King. Because they and the NAACP wasn't going to be in it. Roy Wilkins is like, we doing our own work. They still in our thunder. Anna Hedgeman is like, no, you need to be at the table. There is a march to Washington in 1963, on Washington in 63, that has everything to do directly with Anna Arnold Hedgeman making these men sit and talk with each other and figuring out how to pull the logistics. But let me not leave the sisters on this, because she suggests Myrlie Evers. Myrlie Evers gets caught up in traffic. She missed her speaking slot because they did put her on. Bayard Rustin was fighting her the whole way. No, we don't need this because, Bayard Rustin is A. Philip Randolph's man. We start talking about gender in a governance formation. I'm not talking about social structure. I have no interest in all in any social structure commentary on the March on Washington and what it means before my interest in us having a conversation. Because gender is a challenge, as Dr. Watkins says, Lethea Watkins says, quoting her colleague, the great Oyewonke Oyewumi. Gender, we call gender a social construct. That means it's constantly being renegotiated. Sitting at Audrey's funeral yesterday and seeing all those men on the podium, but then seeing the women come up one by one, and you see the balance and the energy shift, seeing the role of sisters, including Dr. Bird in that, but seeing how much more we have to do to build community, but understanding that in that governance formation, this is a rock solid governance formation to which we retreat when we really had to get some work done, because these Negroes here are the ones that will fight you and then pray for your soul after they've killed you. But they gonna fight you first, not the Negroes pleading for admission. Is to understand that to talk about gender, even in terms of women not being included in the March on Washington speaker list, became a conversation about how women have been at the center of the organizational work. So yes, Myrlie Evers, they said, okay, all right, fine. All right, okay. Myrlie Evers, she got caught in traffic, couldn't get there. So who spoke for the second time that day? Daisy Bates from Arkansas. Daisy Bates was the speaker. She spoke there. It's very interesting to hear, because what Anna Arnold Hedgeman did, she got with two sisters who raised money for the civil rights movement, Corinne Smith and Jerry Stark from the Labor Council, American Negro Labor Council. And they was like, look, how are we going to put pressure on these people? So what you see, you hear Dr. King for a split second in all the little clips from the news, but what you probably haven't seen is Rosa Parks spoke very briefly at the March on Washington. She was introduced. It was downplayed, as Anna Arnold Hedgeman critiques in The Gift of Chaos, her book. Lena Horne spoke. One word. She got to the podium, got to the microphone and said, freedom. drop the mic. It's like, what? Wait a minute, what was that? Josephine Baker. Because now you got gaps. You'll see them again today, where it's something, you know, people not doing anything or you got transitioning. They give the mic to Josephine Baker, and for 2 minutes, this daughter of East St. Louis, leaving the United States in the wake of race violence and massacres, becomes a huge star overseas in Western Eurasia, in Europe, a global star. She comes back in military dress. They gave her the high honors in the French military for being part of the resistance, perhaps even a spy, as recent scholarship says. But she spoke for almost 2 minutes. She gave the longest speech by a woman that day at the March on Washington. And she talked about coming back to the United States and thank for welcoming me back to have this conversation. Never thought I'd see today. Gloria Richardson, the great Gloria Richardson, who made transition shortly, a little while ago. Gloria Richardson, the young sister, the hero of Cambridge, Massachusetts, the intellectual, the warrior. They don't know what she gonna say. Gloria Richardson gets to the podium. Gloria Richardson says, hello. And somebody cuts the mic. You can't let this young buck talk. This ain't John Lewis, who didn't write his speech. The famous moment of confrontation when John Lewis is getting ready to use the speech from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to set fire to the whole thing a little bit, singe it a little bit, and A. Philip Randolph entreats him, pleads to him, no, I've waited my whole life for this, don't do it. And him and Julian Bond rewriting parts of the speech. Now, they wasn't going to set fire to the thing, but they're going to be a little bit heavier than what Randolph, Rustin, and them want, because they worried about their white allies. This is the conundrum when the social structure and the government structure overlap. But he still gave a speech that Anna Arnold Hedgeman writes. In fact, let's let Ms. Hedgeman speak for herself, if I can find it quickly, on the March on Washington. So I named some of the sisters who were at the march. She says, and it might be at the end of this chapter, because she talks about Martin Luther King. Let me see. No. It's not in the trumpet sounds. This was 64, right after. I think it's in The Gift of Chaos, where she writes, yes, this is a good place for us to bring it in for a landing. Yes. She says that the challenge she remembers came to me in terms of the speeches of the day. She says, from John Lewis, young representative of students, white and Negro, who were even then marching, suffering in and out of jails, and challenging adults who had taken them for granted for too long. John has said to us, here's what he said, quote, we march today for jobs and freedom. Hundreds of thousands of our brothers are not here, for they are receiving starvation wages or no wages at all. These people who weren't at Martha's Vineyard, talking about affirmative action. Sharecroppers in the Delta of Mississippi are in the fields today working for less than $3 a day, 12 hours a day. The danger of silence and the reality of economic and social program problems cried out for change. Could we achieve those changes? This is what she's saying. This is what Anna Arnold Hedgeman said. I came away from the March on Washington, what John Lewis was talking about in terms of social class. That was the thing that resonated with me. And of course, Gloria Richardson, who only got to say hello, Lena Horne, who only got to say freedom, while they waiting on Martin Luther King, they are hustled up away from the March on Washington and put in taxis and told to leave because they are seen as being disruptive. Wow. I hope nobody asked nobody to leave for the day. So let me wind up and end with this. The day after the March on Washington, Dorothy Height calls a meeting. Because after the march, they go to the White House. But Dorothy Height is like, where the hell y'all going? Are the men going? No problem. That's the show stuff. That's the social structure stuff. It's not that it's unimportant, because we're going to get the Civil Rights Act of 1964 after that, and a bloody Freedom Summer of 64, preceded by a bloody the death of Medgar Evers in the summer of 63. Then after I Have a Dream, they blow up 4 little girls and shoot 2 black boys in Birmingham. So we see, of course, Kennedy's killed in November 63. The thing is rolling over. You come up into 64, and the Civil Rights Act of 64 after Freedom Summer is passed, after Johnson, of course, is president. But Dorothy Height said, okay, y'all going to the White House, whatever. Tomorrow, I want the sisters to get together. And she calls a meeting where black women come together to say, okay, after the march, now what? At that meeting, in Anna Arnold Hedgeman's papers, is the speech, part of the speech in a letter form, that Pauli Murray gives. Pauli Murray is at that meeting that the sisters have the day after the March on Washington. So while we're talking about the 28th, which is Monday, it might be nice on Tuesday to talk about the women planning what comes next. Because if we go back to 41, when Phil Randolph and Arnold Hedgeman and them threatened to march on Washington in 41, and in response, Roosevelt signs Executive Order 8802 desegregating the military, a huge leap, and establishes the Fair Employment Practices Commission that Anna Arnold Hedgeman is in leadership of afterwards. It's important to remember that when Randolph calls off the march in response to what Roosevelt did, the black women like Mary Bethune is like, ho, chief, hold on. You calling off the march? You know what? No problem. Go ahead. They have a 2-day conference at Howard University at Rankin Chapel. What do we do next? These black women are no joke.